At the climax of Season 2, Jinx will destroy Piltover by nuking it off the face of the map and the explosion will kill Heimerdinger. This video is a remastering of my 3 outdated videos that I always reference with better audio and a lot of new evidence. First off, plot armor does not exist in Arcane. Arcane contains many playable champions from League of Legends and people think that means they can't die. Wrong, plot armor does not exist. This is spoiler armor. For example, Echo uses time travel in League and that power is extremely important to his character design. Since Echo doesn't have time travel yet in Arcane, he obviously won't die until he gets time travel. Hence, because League players come into the series with prior knowledge, it means we have been spoiled and characters have spoil armor up until they develop congruently to their in-game counterpart. When it comes to storytelling, you want to save the most exciting parts of character arcs to be aligned with the climax of the story. As each character faces greater turmoil and conflict, the collective tensions of character journeys culminate to maximize narrative stakes that form the climax of the story. Out of the most important characters in Arcane, a majority of them are champions, and hence why their final developments have been saved for Season 2, where the story hits its peak. This involves the Jace Victor falling out, Vi becoming an enforcer, Caitlyn becoming sheriff, Singed creating monsters, Victor turning into a robot, Echo getting time travel, etc. As of Season 1, only 2 characters have been fully realized, Silco and Jinx. Jinx has no spoiler armor at this point and she is up to be killed, and her developments in Season 2 shatter viewer expectations about plot armor. Simply put, Arcane is canon to the world. League of Legends is not. We already know this is true, as in League, characters have different skins that sometimes dictate an alternate universe. Especially in the Star Guardian skin line, some characters are already dead but they still appear in League. Thus, League is quite literally breaking the alternate universe canon, and I don't see why they can't do that with Arcane, as doing so wouldn't hinder the game much. My premier example is Jinx. In Season 2, she loses her middle finger while Jinx in-game has her hands intact. If you take League of Legends as canon, then nothing bad can happen to Baby Blue here, but such a major character change proves that Arcane is stepping beyond the in-game limitations. Okay, maybe some of you are saying League of Legends can always adapt itself to fit Arcane, but that doesn't mean champions can completely die. Well, as Season 2 progresses, more and more characters will lose their spoiler armor. Vi becomes an enforcer, Jace and Victor have their confrontation, Heimerdinger starts experimenting, and Echo gets his Z-Drive. The Arcane creators have said that they care about writing a good story first and foremost. I believe it is highly likely they'll kill off some League characters. Imagine if a champion dies, that means our preconceptions of champion plot armor have been shattered and truly anything can happen in the series. Just a huge step forward in storytelling. I know Christian Link said he wouldn't kill off a character solely for the sake of destroying expectations, but narrative-wise there are a lot of characters who have been set up to die. So that, paired along with the benefit of subverting expectations, gives extra reason to killing off champions. As long as there's a good story reason for deaths, they will happen, and the writers have been edging all of us about it already. I think we all want Arcane writers to prioritize continuing to tell a good story instead of catering to the game's consistency. On that front, I want to say that Heimerdinger has been the most set up to die in Season 2. Heimerdinger supposedly represents the city of tomorrow and is the de facto head of the council and symbolic leader of Piltover. However, throughout the story, Heimerdinger's main themes have been time, progress, and fear. As a Yordle, he is immortal as he is essentially a spirit creature. Subsequently, he lived for about 300 years and won't die of old age. As a direct result of that, Heimerdinger's vision of progress is warped. Slow, tenured increments of developments is much safer and stable compared to radical breakthroughs. After all, to him, 10 years and a week are basically the same thing. Ideologically, he supports progress as the founder of Piltover, but in practice, his halting of development runs counterintuitive to that goal. After witnessing a giant mage war, Heimerdinger lets that fear of magic dictate his decisions, and resultingly his attachment to safety. Thus, with his distorted relationship with time and borderline paranoia for stability, Heimerdinger acts as an anchor that tethers Piltover's social-political structure from natural development, antithetical to progression. This is encapsulated with his discussion of Sternlich Padidli, a former associate and professor who preferred nurturing his students than pursuing personal invention, believing them to contribute far more to society than him. Well, Heimerdinger calls his life a sacrifice. In all regard, Padidli did not sacrifice himself. A fundamental theme of Arcane is progress and generational change, which means passing on the torch to the next generation. I'll have a full analysis about that soon, but in short, we see a young generation inheriting the ideals of their mentors and guardians to write their own stories and change the problems they currently face in society. Same thing with Padidli, who acted within Piltover's ideals of progress as opposed to personal achievement. When Singed talks about his former relationship with Heimerdinger, he mentions how they parted ways because Heimerdinger favored public opinion over scientific development. Singe and Heimerdinger are essentially polar opposites of each other on that spectrum, with Heimerdinger barely doing anything science-related these days, but well-loved by the city, while Singe is alone but revolutionizing sciences every day. Interesting how Heimerdinger's successor is Jace and Singe's is Victor, and the two, as of Season 1, are very buddy-buddy for now. But back to Heimerdinger, who has a history of scientific achievement and defining himself in the city, but he chose not to sacrifice himself in the art of mentorship, and we don't see him do science, so all he does these days is lead the council horribly and enjoy life as the CEO of privilege and grandfather to the city. With Jace stepping into the fray, Heimerdinger says a specific line: "You remind me of myself." Jace is quite literally Heimerdinger's successor in every way, with that storyline's climax being Jace ousting him from the council to become the new leader. We know Jace has always been about progress, pushing for the development of Hextech until he quite literally raises Piltover's skyline. Then he abandoned scientific research in favor of public service as he believes it would do more good under his decision making. For the central themes of the story, that being change and progress, the next generation needs to take over to guide things into the future. Both Silco and Vander died passing on their ideals to their daughters, entrusting them with leading the future, while the two died and took their mistakes with them. Grayson passes on her vision of justice and duty to Caitlyn to eventually take up the mantle as new sheriff. Singe gets Victor to internalize the necessity of moral sacrifice, and Bessa drills into Mel the weight of war. In every instance, Arcane kills the mentor to allow the next generation to make their own decisions, to avoid their mistakes. Singe and Bessa are still alive, but Mel has led an entire successful career far removed from her mother, and same goes for Singe. Both of them are done teaching, and the point is that the old generation doesn't meddle with the problems passed on. Victor has already learned Singe's lesson, Jinx realizes what she needs to become, and Vi understands her purpose in life. And Bessa entering Piltover's affairs and stepping on their daughter's toes is intentional as a secondary antagonist, and she's going to get her ass kicked back into Noxus one way or another. But Heimerdinger, whose entire personality has been about Piltover's success, is clashing heads with Jace when it comes to their mindsets towards progress and magic. And now Heimerdinger's mentoring Echo and Zahn, possibly drilling into Echo his other themes of time and fear. We know Echo has a very mature relationship with time, but his time travel device is going to regress that development, thanks Heimerdinger, and give him the fear of trying to control everything to be the perfect timeline. That's exactly why in the trailer Echo talks about needing to forget the past and move forward, as a direct contrast from Heimerdinger's past maxing and recovering from the fear he will learn from him. Basically, Arcane's main messaging is about progressing the current status quo as new minds take up old duties to push for change, and Heimerdinger, as mentor to not one but two major characters and meddling with both of their goals, is going to have something happen to remove him from the picture to be congruent with Arcane's main theme. And that's why Piltover will blow up and kill him. First off, Piltover will get blown up. This is because we want Season 2 to be more bombastic than Season 1, and the great extension of Jinx destroying the Council in Season 1 is Jinx destroying all of Piltover in Season 2. It would also add genuine, tangible stakes to war as we want something monumental to get destroyed, and I think demolishing Piltover would be good. Symbolically, flattening both cities creates a blank slate of quite literally building both sides up as equals as they step into the future. This would also tie back to Silco telling Jinx to show them all. Heimerdinger, when looking at the Hex Core, notes that it's the seed towards destruction. Don't tell me that's not foreshadowing. Combined with the fact that the Hex Core is quite possibly evolving in the trailers, and the Hexgate is parting the clouds like the terrorist mage in Heimerdinger's nightmares alongside Jinx getting into the airship, makes me believe that Jinx is trying to fly up into the Hexgate, which has the evolved Hex Core in it, and uses it to nuke all of Piltover. Hextech and the Hex Core have been about change and adaptation. We know that especially during war, all of the factions, including Firelights, Piltover, Noxus, and Zahn, have their own specific visions for what the city needs to look like. Thus, all of their interests will coincide at the climax of the story in the final battle as they all fight each other over this symbolic and practical symbol of change, the Hex Core, which will adapt to its victor, and utilize the winner's vision to transmutate that change onto all of Piltover. For Jinx, she quite literally has a vision for all of Piltover to turn into powder. Doing so would also define Jinx as the ultimate antagonist of the story and push her way off the edge, way too far past redemption, which would make her ultimate forgiveness that much more powerful. There's a lot of foreshadowing moments for Piltover's destruction. In every scene showcasing Piltover or the Hexgates, there are sinister undertones to the coinciding dialogue that suggests the city's ultimate demise. When Piltover gets blown up and we all rewatch the series, every one of these lines allude to that catastrophe. In the first scene of Arcane, we get a fight on the bridge where everything begins. Everything is shrouded in smoke and brimstone, which would be the aftermath scene of Jinx's final explosion. I say this because as Vander finds the two girls and takes them away, Vi looks back at the city in anger. But she doesn't really act on that anger later in the show. But it's definitely parallels to Jinx's perspective towards Piltover's dominating skyline. The entire bridge scene is a microcosm of the Piltover's on story, two inseparable but irreconcilable halves of the city, their actions deciding between further peace or war. A cyclical tension bound to resume, this time with Vi's hatred of the city indirectly passed down to Powder to Jinx. Now the next scenes their attitudes completely shift. On their way to rob Jace, Vi and Powder gaze upon Piltover and its glory in awe. Vi states that it's nice to get above everything. This line is pretty confusing. Are they getting above Zahn? But they love Zahn, right? Are they getting above Piltover? Clearly not, because there's so much more of Piltover still above them. This, combined with the Jinx airship quote, makes me think that this moment will further foreshadow a flattened Piltover, with Jinx standing at the very top above the doom below her airship. Now we always get these panning shots of Piltover's glory throughout the story, while we only get a few for Zahn. First is when Vi's gang return from their heist, and we get a sense of the dark, broody, but cozy Zahn. There's nothing to be proud of, but the people's survivability and resourcefulness make this a found home for its inhabitants, and they make it work. Next is with Savika returning from the mission, and we see how much more vibrant, exotic, and unstable the new Zahn is after the time skip. However, throughout Season 1, Piltover as a city is shown as a paradigm of innovation and success, virtually flawless in pure presentation. So just this dynamic and portrayal makes me think that there is going to be some sort of reversal, but that's just speculation. On to the next foreshadowing moment, Vi explicitly says that this city will respect us before again looking up at Piltover. Come post time skip and Vi doesn't really care about respect at all. But you know who does? That's right. Again, Jinx inherits Vi's and Soko's viewpoints into her own ideology that pushes her to teach Piltover to respect Zahn's determination. Soko also mentions how true power comes to those who will do anything. Jinx is certainly the sacrificial type, and to ensure Zahn's independence, I don't think she has any qualms of leveling Piltover. Now, right at the height of tension in Act 1, the broken fence represents the divide between the two cities, but the holes show hope for connection, forgiveness, and understanding, much like what Vander instills into Vi in the following scene. It's funny, the dichotomy between Vi and Jinx, peace and war, connection and separation, are mimicked by the bridge as a symbolic motif. War and peace occur on the bridge. The bridge represents the separation and connection as a narrative device, and each sister has their completely separate connotations in relation to the bridge. Vi learns of peace and fosters relationships on it, while Jinx destroys, kills, and wages war from it. After the time skip, heimerdinger and Jace talk about Piltover turning 200 years old. The mesmerizing shots we get truly give us a sense of how this is the city of progress, growing each year with the new Hex Gate as the tallest building in the skyline. However, heimerdinger lights a shrine to Sternwick Padidley as mentioned earlier. You know what's interesting? Padidley, someone representative of Piltover and contributing to the city's ideology, was described that everything he built exploded, melted, or toppled over. For heimerdinger to respect him and light a shrine to him, he probably had a large hand at building Piltover to be what it is today. Definitely not referring to Piltover eventually exploding, as we get more wide shots of the city. Definitely not. Soko also explains to Jinx that Piltover's hex gates are leaving Zahn further and further behind right before we get another shot of them. If only there was some way to tear Piltover down to Zahn's level. Later in episode 4, Jinx takes down the building to steal a hex gem. That's another notch in the belt for Jinx taking Piltover down the level to build Zahn up one. In episode 5, we have Jace and Mel looking up at the hex gates as Jace talks about how his father and hammers helped build Piltover, almost like he will need to do it again. Episode 7 has Mel staring up at the hex gate as she's told that Piltover looks vulnerable because of all the chaos going on in Zahn. Yeah, it's gonna get a whole lot more vulnerable. Episode 9, Mel talks with her mom on her balcony overlooking the city, and Bessa talks about how they need a hex-tech weapon to keep themselves safe and let the war unfold in Piltover, and Mel comes back to Noxus. Later, Jace and Soko meet on the dam, while Soko implies standing in the way of progress as Jace fears what war between two cities look like. I don't need to say anything at this point. Lastly, we get a shot of the council right before Jace proposes peace and Jinx shoots the rocket with a blood moon in the background. This isn't really foreshadowing, more so as it's just set up for the actual war that will unfold out of this. It's very interesting how in every single wide shot of Piltover, the surrounding conversations always include some hint of collapse, destruction, and calamity. I believe all these moments will lead up to Jinx dialing the stakes up to 1,000,000 at the climax of Season 2 and blowing everything, as all these scenes hold a completely different twisted meaning upon our inevitable rewatch. Jinx will destroy the old Piltover before the two cities get built up together. You know who quite literally represents the old Piltover? Heimerdinger. Blowing up Piltover and killing Heimerdinger in one swoop would be an end to the old era of Piltover, inequality, and injustice. But can you actually kill Heimerdinger? Aren't yours those spiritual beings? If the physical body gets destroyed, their magical soul will just reconstitute in Bandle City, home of all Yordles. But this isn't your ordinary explosion. Magic of some sort is needed if you want to level all of Piltover, especially if Jinx uses the Hex Core. Heimerdinger shat his pants for a reason, because that unbridled magic is possibly a real danger to him. With the Arcane waking up and limitless possibilities it entails, it might just be enough to incinerate our least favorite furball. In Arcane, every major character gets an introduction flashback scene that determines the overall course of the episode. Caitlyn learning to shoot ends with her finding a reason to pull the trigger. Soko gets introduced right before changing everything. Funny how Heimerdinger hasn't gotten one yet. It's especially important for us to see Heimerdinger's flashback as it will key us into the crucial details surrounding magic and Piltover's founding. Now, if that happened on episode 8, the second to last episode, I see it really likely that the ending will flip the intro on its head, showing us Piltover's collapse as we reach for the climax for episode 9's falling action. Now, the last piece of evidence for Heimerdinger dying is that he got way too lucky getting out of Jinx's season 1 rocket when he was the main culprit of all of the Undercity's pain. It would be just desserts for him to get his comeuppance and tank Jinx's true explosion as she detonates the Hex Core in a cruel twist of fate, as everything Heimerdinger feared would happen with magic in his beloved city came true. But Arcane is a story of forgiveness. Somehow Jinx will be redeemed, otherwise it simply wouldn't be a narrative about reconciliation. And it looks like Jinx's explosion was the perfect reset button for setting both cities to square one, as Zaun helps its sister rebuild as both countries build towards a better tomorrow without Heimerdinger. Thank you guys for watching, and we must keep the Heimerdinger dying agenda strong. Another point, Yordles in League of Legends are able to cure any illness they have, and because in Arcane we see these crackhead Zaunites that literally look like they're declining, it shows that mortality is more of a factor in Arcane compared to League of Legends, so Yordles might actually have a greater chance of dying in the show. This video was a real doozy to make, and I think I'm gonna try ramping up the quality just because everything's exploding right now, and yeah, please leave a comment, and I'll catch you guys in the next one, yeah? Bye bye!